Hi there, I'm Shaun Bindley and this is Meet the Ministers. My guest on the program this evening is the Minister for Police, Corrective Services and Emergency Services, the member for Nudgee, Neil Roberts. Neil, welcome to the program.
Good, thank you, Shaun.
You're not originally from Brisbane, are you? I believe you grew up in the country in Charleville.
Yes, I was born in Charleville. My parents ran a small business there, an automotive workshop, and I spent all of my primary schooling years in Charleville, and then much to my disgust, and I was very upset at the time, my parents moved to Brisbane, and I've lived in the Banyo area now most of my life since then, and I love the place.
So it was a hard move for you coming into the big smoke?
It was a difficult move, I think, for a young child.
Yeah.
I'd obviously built up my lifelong friendships as a child, grown up on the banks of the Warrego River, which was my playground, and had to leave behind all those friends that I'd grown up with since basically the day I was born. So it was a little bit traumatic, but as with everything, you move on, and I've come to love the part of Brisbane that I live in.
What did you love about Charleville the most? A pretty special place to grow up for a young boy, I think.
Yeah,
having the run of the whole world, basically.
Well, essentially that's it.
Yeah.
I think it's really just the open space. I rode horses. I had friends that were on properties, and we'd visit the properties on the weekend with sheep and cattle and kangaroos and all the rest of it. It was just really the open space and the adventure that a young person can engage in a place like that. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah. You get a chance to get back out there these days?
Well, coincidentally, it was my role as Minister which took me back to Charleville. I hadn't, in fact, been there for 30 odd years.
Yeah.
And it was the Charleville floods, which brought me back there in a real sense just a few short years ago. I had, in fact, had a small visit a couple of years before that with the Community Cabinet, but it was the floods that gave me an opportunity to, again, touch base with the town and see how it had grown and changed over many, many years. Was
it traumatic for you to return under those circumstances?
I think seeing the township experiencing such hardship and difficulties was a little bit difficult in that sense, but of course the difficulty was for the people who lived there. As Minister, I was there obviously to provide support and also just to ensure that the government support that could be provided was being delivered. But it was an interesting time to see the town underwater. It was something that I'd in fact experienced as a child, living right on the banks of the Warrego.
Okay.
We'd had the water lap our front fence and indeed the front steps of our home on a number of occasions.
Yeah. Is it getting easier to live out there under those type of circumstances? Are we making improvements in country areas that are suffering the inundation of floodwaters? Is it getting easier for them? Are we able to make those changes at this point?
Yes, there have in fact been a number of changes in places like Charleville and Augathello from the days when I grew up there.
Yeah.
Charleville now has a very significant levee bank running most of the length, in fact the entire length of the township as it borders the river, places like Augathello as well. So there have been significant changes and improvements made to protect the town from flood, but of course, as we've seen in recent years, Charleville floods not just from the river, also from Bradley's Gully, which runs through the centre of town. So they've still experienced very significant flooding. But certainly the river's prevented a number of floods getting into the town.
And of course that phrase, the flood we can never have, kind of means that it's inevitable that we will have that, and that was proven here in Brisbane in January, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
So, okay, tell me about moving to Brisbane. How was that? What was your view of Brisbane coming? What are you, about 12, 13 years old?
Would have been about 11.
Yeah, okay.
11, 12, sort of that sort of age frame.
I guess moving into that Banyo Nudgee area probably could have been easy because there were still wide open spaces, a lot of horses, a lot of equine industry out there. So I guess that may have eased the stress or the strain for you a little?
It did a little because in those days Banyo was, and still to some respects is, like a small country town. Yeah. It's a very clearly identified community with no major roads going through it. They go around it. But in those days when we moved from Charleville to Banyo, there was a lot of farmland, racehorse trainers, people still growing some crops in the area. So it did have a little bit of a country feel about it, which was nice. What
was the change in your parents' life that prompted them to move to the city?
I think they were just looking for new opportunities. I think they realised that with the nature of education, they wanted to provide a good opportunity for myself and my sister. At the time that we lived in Charleville, there wasn't a high school. So I was booked in as a boarder in a city-based school. So I think they made the decision a few years before that was to occur that they would in fact move to a larger population centre. But as I said, it was a difficult time, a big risk in terms of moving from an area where we had well-established roots and family members and friends. But in the long run, I think for all of us, it was a good move. And whereas I still very much love where I live now, I still have a soft spot for the bush, and particularly Charleville.
Pretty hard for young kids to go off to boarding school at the age of 11 or 12, but I think we often forget the fact that it's pretty traumatic on the parents as well.
Yes, it is, that's right. And, it's just one of those things which many country people, it's just a part of their lives, particularly those that live on properties, sheep stations and cattle. It's just really been a part of their lifestyle for many, many years.
Now, your parents moved to Brisbane and ran the local newsagent, is that right?
That's right, yes. Yeah. My father was looking for a business to buy into because he'd run the automotive business in Charleville. So I identified the news agency at Banyo. So we moved to Brisbane around about 1967, or in 1967, and Mum and Dad ran the news agency for a number of years, which was another interesting experience. My father did the paper run, and it was 3 a.m. starts, Monday through to Sunday, which was an interesting experience.
We're going to come back to the fact that 3 a.m. starts seem to be a pretty constant thing in your life. It stands you in good stead from a very early age, getting out there rolling papers and helping your dad do that job.
Yeah, I think so, yeah, and I did start my own discipline of 3 a.m. starts for a range of things that I did, including training racehorses and study and so on.
Yeah.
So maybe it was that experience of seeing my dad do it and the discipline of having to do that every day of the year except Good Friday and Christmas Day. And maybe that provided me with some inspiration to do it myself when I took on other challenges later in life.
Was it a positive move for your mum and dad? Were they happy here straight away? Was that move an easy one for them overall?
I think it was a good, positive, constructive move for them.
Obviously, they had the reasons in place that they needed to make the move, so they were backing that up, weren't they?
Yeah, that's right. And I think the fact that they went into small business and established themselves. Ultimately, my father went on to... we moved out of the news agency business after a number of years. It's a very demanding role for people to play, particularly if you're involved in the delivery of the newspapers in those early morning runs. So they were in it for a few years, and then ultimately my father bought a taxi and then moved into an area where he trained as an apprentice when he was young and went back to tool making and ultimately working with his hands, which is something that he loved as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, once again, that we see that correlation, that kind of schooling and lifestyle moving through from your parents moving through into your life as well, Neil Roberts. My guest on the program today is the member for Nudgee, Neil Roberts. My name is Shaun Bindley, and we'll be back after the break.